A joint event between NDRE 24, DSRE 32, Noida Roundtable 25, DART 311, and Muzaffar Nagar Roundtable 346. And we have Advocate Vicky Shah with us, who's going to take this session. I'm just going to introduce Vicky briefly, though his brief profile is also a lot, but I'll try and sum it up as fast as possible. So Vicky is an advocate who practices
पीछे के
primarily in
पीछे
Bombay, and he's an
हाँ पड़ा
author,
है ना
trainer,
डी ब्लॉक
speaker,
में जो
as well as
लिफ्ट से मैं निकलूंगा लिफ्ट से निकलकर मैं
a ECPCB certified DPO, the first Indian advocate to actually have that from the European Center for Privacy and Cybersecurity in Netherlands. He's been involved in training over 1,25,000 people through face-to-face interactions in 21 plus states in India, and indirectly through various online platform events, conferences, etc. since 2004, and he continues to do so as he's doing today. He's been invited by Maharashtra Cyber Cell as appointed by the MHA India for suggesting inputs for amending the Information Technology Act, and he specializes in preventing cybercrime, digital payments, fraud, business email compromise incidents, as well as recovering of monies from such incidents. He's assisted a lot of organizations in developing their systems for having them foolproof. He's also been invited by the RBI to address the high-level committee meeting on governance, risk, and compliance, and has been acknowledged for his inputs in the Gopalakrishnan report published in January 2011 on the RBI website. And finally, he's also published the first of its kind and the only book on awareness and prevention of cybercrime, Are You Protected, in 2011. This book is also available on Google Play since 2017. So having said that, I hand it over to Vicky to take this forward. Thank you, Vicky, for joining us, and we hope to have a very awesome session as always with you.
Thanks, Rohan, for this. Rohan and I were discussing a couple of weeks back about a program on awareness, because October is usually celebrated as a cyber security and awareness month across the globe. And fortunately, today it's a coincidence that on 17th of October 2000, that is 20 years back, our IT Act got enforced and enacted. So it was today's the anniversary of the law on which we are speaking today. And that was notified in June. Then the actual effectiveness was from 17th of October, and 20 years have come. We have completed 20 years of the law. And honestly, even after this 20 years, if we were to say only 30% of the law is being enforced or adopted by the organizations across India. Few of them don't even know the provisions, what exists, what is the legal recourse, and why this law was enacted, and how it is going to affect everybody. So cyber fraud, when we say, it's a huge umbrella, and there are a lot of branches under that. I'm restricting this to two topics. First is on the awareness of cybercrime and cyber frauds, and second is on the digital payment, because that's the there has been exponential increase in digital payments since last to be precise, from the demonetization. And since lockdown, it has been adopted by 40-50% increase of payments have been there. So the trend says that in the last 5 months we have clocked 4 billion transactions online, which is like a huge number. And when we talk about cyber crimes, people generally believe it is something where computers are involved. It is not always the case. So if I were to differentiate the two, computer is used in three aspects. First, as a tool; second, as a target; third, as indirectly or incidental to a crime. Now, when we say computer is used as a tool, that means if I use my particular device to send some threatening email, then my computer becomes a tool for it, because the content were generated here. Whoever it is targeted to, if they open that on their mobile phones or laptops or iPad or whatever tablets and system, that particular device becomes a target. So the recipient's device where the email is targeted, that device becomes a target. And the third situation is where computer is incidental to a crime or indirectly related to a crime, wherein you don't do anything from the computer except creating some fake documents, fake mark sheets, forged documents, or fake currency printing, a fake visa, fake job offer. So anything where computer is used to do some manipulation or of a document or otherwise, then in that case computer is indirectly involved in an offense. Now this does not mean that it's a cybercrime. For it to be qualified or classified as a cybercrime, in the Indian context, there is a term called computer related offense. So the law recognizes computer related offense. There is no term cybercrime defined across the globe. So if it's a misnomer, but that's how the name popularity gets famous. It's easy to remember cyber and crime, but it is actually computer offense. And why we focus on this concept is because when we go for legal recourse, whatever is there in the law book prevails over the other concepts. So as a citizen, as a user of the technology, we should be aware of the right terms, right terminology, so that we don't make mistake while dealing with the subject. There are some 6 provisions in the act about cyber frauds. What could be a simplest cyber fraud? Uh, Forwarding a message on your WhatsApp, which is not authentic, is one of the simplest form of crime. And most of us share information without even verifying whether that is correct or not. Now, if the recipient has any objection and if they complain, then it becomes offense. If there is no complainant, there is no offense. So for any offense in that context, if there is a complainant or there is a victim or there is a person who is affected, if he or she complains about it, then only that particular incident becomes a complaint. Otherwise, it's not an offense. For example, obscene content or pornography. So, but if you publish, distribute, transmit, it is an offense. On the other side, child pornography is a global offense across the world. Even viewing, publishing, possessing, or transmitting is an offense. And typically, because we are all in the working professionals, either entrepreneurs or in our work environment, email becomes the base of our communication or channel. And email itself has 15 types of offenses which are associated with it, right from your spamming emails, unsolicited communication, blackmailing, threatening, extortion, advance fee schemes, job frauds, mule recruitment schemes, ID theft, impersonation, misrepresentation. So if we go and on this all these words, it itself is a big domain where a lot of offenses happen. Now, as far as we are concerned, we all have 2 identities. One is our physical identity, and one is our virtual identity. And virtual identity is based on the information which are related with us in physical context. So your name, date of birth, your mobile number, your mother's maiden name, all these are crucial information which are required to be filled before you get an online profile or identity. Now, this identity can be misrepresented by a person using your own information, or they may create a fake details by using your name and other credentials which belongs to you, but you have not created it. So in this lockdown, what happened, we got 5-6 very interesting case studies where one of the user, he had posted photographs on a Facebook profile. Now, what this perpetrator or fraudster did, he downloaded those photographs. He also got the mobile number from the Facebook profile because people share it publicly. There are settings which allows you to stop it from public display. So if you go to the privacy and security setting of your Facebook profile, only your friends or the contacts can get their email and mobile. Not everybody will get it. But by default, the settings are public view. So anybody can get your mobile number. In this case, his mobile number was known. The photographs were downloaded by the fraudster. He the fraudster used his own mobile number. On the display, he used the picture which he downloaded from the Facebook, and through the mobile number which was available on Facebook, he contacted this couple saying that if you don't pay me X amount, I will publish this photo with modifying it on a porn site. Now, this gentleman got afraid because he was not understanding how did the photo went to this guy, and the photos were in a swimsuit, so it could be easily modified or morphed. And that was the reason why this guy got panicked, and he agreed to pay. He ended up paying 25,000 rupees. And after that, he approached us And then when we found out that this guy had downloaded the photograph from the Facebook. He got the mobile number also from the Facebook. On WhatsApp, he did the correspondence. And then it was too late for us to do a police complaint and block the because the money was already withdrawn by the guy. Now, in this situation, typically, this case is of misrepresentation and ID theft because the personally identifiable photo of the couple was used, and he blackmailed on the WhatsApp for extorting money. So this is one just such example. There are ample of cases already there which we encounter day by day. But the main issue here is that if you in your own phones, there is a setting where you can stop anybody from seeing your photo and also adding you to any group in the privacy setting. But this setting is not known, or very few people actually configure these settings. By doing so, you stop such unsolicited correspondence and communication. Another case we got where on the Google search, typically when somebody has to find something, we use Google. So Google gives an option to claim a business or claim a area of operation. If you find a particular stuff which you want to buy, you just name it on the Google search and it will display you certain details. Now, not all this information are verified by Google. We got a case where a fraudster had one of the bank branch was claimed to be the fraudster claimed to be the branch manager of this branch, and he used his mobile number as a point of contact. And then the customers of that branch, when they called the customer care, he said, yes, we do KYC online updation because of lockdown. You kindly give your debit card number and expiry and you will get a OTP for verification. Kindly share that and we will activate your debit card. Now, by doing so, the actual transaction happened and the money were lost. So Google does not do a verification from the organization whether it is belong to them or not. Whoever claims it, based on the claiming, after verifying the OTP and the mobile number of that person, that entity, they will authorize or edit or verify the business. Now, once the business is verified, nobody else can re-verify it. But if your business, suppose if you are a entrepreneur doing business online and you have a Google search, you have an office address which is linked with Google. But if you don't claim this business as your own, there may be chance that somebody may impersonate it or claim the profile as his own, and then he may or she may target you. In fact, yesterday only I got a call from a lady. She is into baby products, selling of baby products, clothes and other stuffs online, and her Instagram profile was compromised. She clicked on the link. By clicking on the link, the phone got compromised and the fraudster got access to the Instagram account. He changed the Instagram handle, he changed the name and the email and the mobile. This lady had 22,000 followers. The entire follower base and customer base now is with the fraudster. And it will take at least 2 months for her to get this profile back, because police case, FIR, investigation, and all this procedure will take minimum 2 to 3 months. So this is the seriousness of the issue when you yourself are not securing your online identity. So identity prevention becomes a number one priority for all of us. We have smartphones, we have mobile number, we have email IDs. Preferably, if you are a businessman, you should use corporate emails and not a free Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail account. That gives you less security, less sense of legal recourse. When you own a private domain, you have more control of it. You can have your own email servers configured. You can implement digital signatures with that, so nobody can spoof your domain. That is the area, because email becomes part and parcel of all your communication. Whether you want to be on social media, whether you want to do business, whether you want to, even if you buy the new phone today, the first thing the phone wants to do is ask you your email, configure with the net, Wi-Fi, register on the internet, and then the phone starts. So email becomes your important instrument, which will be of significant importance in future as we progress, because if your emails are not secure, it is as good as other things are not secured. So a takeaway from you for this is you should always have 2 email accounts: personal for your social media and other profiles, professional private one for your business, and both should be different. They shouldn't be same, they shouldn't be linked to each other. We have got a case where a person was using a Gmail account for business. He linked his bank account statements and everything to this account. He also configured all the social media profile with the same email account, only one email account. And unfortunately, he did not set up two-factor password. And his password got leaked because of a phishing attempt. Now, phishing means you get a look-alike link of a particular service provider. You click on that, they ask you your username and password. And once you type, this username and password goes to the fraudster who has given this link to you. And after that, he compromised the entire email. He changed the phone number, alternate email. So recovering this email ID itself was a big Herculean task, because your last known password, your activation of your mobile phones, and if it is a free account, there is only limited support by the service provider to you. If this was a paid account, because you get invoices every month, you make a payment, they give you 24/7 support, which is not otherwise available in a free account. So that is the reason why we do not recommend to use free accounts and a paid account. And paid account does not cost you much. It's almost like 200 rupees per month. So yearly, if it is 2,500 rupees with GST and all, which is a fair deal compared to the kind of information that we store in our email, especially for the business purpose. If it is a free and a social media related, you can always, close the account, reopen a new account. But as far as possible for your any commercial and business communication, you should use a private email and not a free email. Another form of cyber fraud, apart from hacking and ID theft or social media, is about KYC frauds. So most of you are asked by your financial advisor, or when you travel, your travel agents ask you to send passport copies, PAN card copies on the email. Now these copies should not be sent in a soft form. The best way to send this information is you take a printout of this. On the document, you write the reason and the purpose for which you are sending it to the person, and then scan that document and then email it. By doing so, you are avoiding the risk of your ID theft from the person who is receiving your documents. We have got cases where people misuse this photograph, the ID documents, by changing the photograph and the name, and procure fake SIM cards with that stolen identity. So if something goes wrong tomorrow, you are targeted by the law enforcement and the perpetrators are free. So any document that you send to someone, never take a photo on WhatsApp and send it, never do scan and send on email. Instead of that, take a Xerox copy. On the photo ID itself, write that this document is given to so-and-so person on so-and-so date and time for so-and-so purpose, then attest it and then send it. Also ensure that this written communication is on the document, partial document and partial white space. If you write everything on the white space, that can be hidden by another white paper, and then again a duplicate copy can be made. So this is not going to protect you. But if you write this on the document, half on the document, half on the actual photo, it is acceptable by them. They will not say no, they will not deny it, but you should write in such a way that all your information is visible to them. So the best practice for this is you scan your image, make it a half page in the Word file, and then you endorse this communication on the document itself, so that this photocopy cannot be fabricated, further misused by somebody else, since it is intended for that particular purpose only. There was a very interesting case which happened, and I have a client for which I'm doing a matter. This person had given the documents to open LIC policy. Now the agent didn't open the LIC policy, but he used this document to open an account with the bank and opened a broking account with a broking firm. And mobile number was also procured using these documents. So the mobile number was in a new email account was created using their mobile number. The bank account got created because of the fake documents, and a broking account got opened because of this document. After using this broking account to the tune of 42.5 CR, and the brokerage received for this was 5 lakh rupees, which went in this account. And because that person had created the bank account, the signature was of that person, because when you go for withdrawal of check, they just match the signature. They don't check the KYC of the customer. You should withdraw the amount, and then after, when the case was investigated, SEBI sent the legal notice to him because his address was correct, but email and mobile were not correct. And today he has been asked to deposit 5 lakh rupees for this fraud, which he never did. But his identity documents were misused by the agent, which was supposed to open LIC policy, but that LIC policy didn't got initialized. Instead, the bank account got opened and the broking account got opened. So this is the seriousness of a document misuse if you don't take precautions of your own ID documents, especially when you submit it physically or even if you submit the same online. So ensure that your particular KYCs are always in order. You do a proper attestation, because online nothing happens on its own. It is only if there is some action or reaction from our side. If we contribute or if we do not take proper action, then only we will find something which is going against us. Otherwise, very few cases where your fault, without your fault, you will be targeted. And typically in such frauds, we find a insider, a banker involved, or a telecom operator guy involved, because of which otherwise there is no cooperation or support for this to happen. But to prove this in the court or to fight it out, it takes 5, 7, 8 years of time, where most of your time, effort, energy is already gone. So in order to safeguard yourself, if we take precautions, we can try not to be the victim. We can have 90%, 95% of the control in our hand. That 5% of uncertainty will always be there, in spite of taking 100% precautions. Because human element, wherever it comes, we will have no control to stop or do any solution for the human intervention. So when there is an insider involvement, even after having so much of control, you still can't prevent yourself from being a victim. Another form of cybercrime would be concerned with respect to this current COVID times, is about cyberbullying for kids. I've been getting a lot of cases where uh, parents complained that some student username and password was leaked, and he abused my child on the online platform. How do we prevent that? So basically most of the schools are giving email ID and passwords for students to log in, which is common and same for all. So you cannot make out who has logged in from which ID and from which device unless they keep a track of it. So this is another trend which is on rise. Another fraud trend during the COVID, which we have got, is about uh, especially the KYC related fraud for wallets, Paytm wallet, PhonePe wallet, Google Pay. So if you are using Google Pay, please be careful. RBI circular is very clearly saying that they are not responsible or liable if you use GPay or Google Pay for payments, because they are not a bank. You should use payment applications only which are associated with a bank or where you have account with. The app of that particular bank is what you should be using it. So this will help. This is the first session which is over. So if you have any questions on this, you can type it out or you can raise your hand and we can interact. Second topic will be purely on digital payments, which I will focus on the next 15-20 minutes. And then the last segment will be on your legal recourse. So you have this. Okay, Pankaj has a question, I guess.
So recently you just spoke about child safety, online safety, and with these online schools, what I have noticed, and this came into my notice also, which I found out as a big threat, is that schools are being conducted on Zoom. Zoom classes are being happened, and what has happened is that de facto the school has all their children on their chat groups.
Okay.
Now, what is happening is that my kid is a very young kid, almost 8 years, and very new to this concept. And he was being added to several chat groups by some people, some members, and they were external people who were being invited by someone, and they were interacting with children. I didn't find anything which was a threat, but this happens to be one void which is so risky, because those kids are not aware that something like this can come to them. And in fact, each one of us sitting here, they have their children attending classes on Zoom or Hangouts and all such things. So those are not closed groups. They are totally open to, like, my kid studies in Pathways, and there are almost more than 800 students studying in Pathways. They were all on the chat groups. So how do you really ensure that the kid understands and doesn't get fooled by someone portraying to be a teacher, or someone who can just lure them and ask them to give out some information about household, maybe ask them to share some pictures, for that matter. That is easily an option.
See, your point is very valid, because I think 60% of the schools are on Zoom, but slowly the schools are changing to Google Meet. With their Gmail has given offers to Education Institute about personalized password and email for each of the student. So it is for the school that is offering Zoom to take care of all these precautions. Otherwise, it will be of it will be of no, the liability will come on the school authorities for any misuse of the platform. Also, your kids, so there are programs which are done specifically for kids and your parents on the online risks of such platforms. So it itself is a 2-hour session where we actually tell child about what are the contents and communication you should be well aware of. Like, for example, there is something called as net lingos. Okay. POS. Now, if I were to ask you what is POS, everybody understands POS as a point of sale. But for kids, it would be parent over shoulder. Okay. So there is a list of net lingo, such words which are used by kids for communication. Uh, so SOS is, for us, it would be something in help. But SOS means who is being monitoring the kid. So they are more than this, where we are not that we take time to grasp it. They are the fast learners of it. So coming back to your point of online, this particular link, you should escalate it to your school authorities, and if you want to do it on Zoom, like currently we are also on Zoom, but you have done a username and a password. Without that, you cannot enter into this. So, and also to make it more strong, there is an email registration based mechanism where only the registered email ID can be part of this and not otherwise. So you all can either have this educated to the school which are hosting this. There is a guidelines from the Ministry of IT on by the CERT also on Zoom, which can be shared to them, and they may try to incorporate controls which will prevent this. But so I'll tell you other case where we got this, where students because of COVID, they are learning online, and they are now having access to mobile phones. So on WhatsApp, one of the student had put the status as the classroom details about lecture 1, so and so, Zoom ID, Zoom details and password. And he had some 500 contacts. So all those 500 people uh, checked it out, because what was it, why was it being shared? And apart from, so every class has around 60 to 100 students. But on that very day, when this gentleman, the student, shared this on the WhatsApp, there were 250 people who were logged into the Zoom, and it didn't allow the other genuine students to be part of the class, because it had a limited accept, people to
Access,
be
yes.
attending the class.
Mhm.
So even those kind of incidents have happened. So unless the school management is educated on this, or they take some action, we will have no solution for this. But I think Google is doing a good job. I'm not marketing Google here, but I've seen Google Meet, because I have kids at home. My brother's kids, they also study online, and they've got a personalized roll number based email ID for the school domain with a password which only they know, nobody else knows it. So that is a more regulated and a better way to do a particular online session than an open kind of environment where you don't have controls in place.
Right.
Any other questions? I think you can raise your. Can we all request all of the other people to switch off their videos? I find Naveen on phone, I find Neeraj on phone. I'm okay with you people talking on phone, but please switch off your video. It distracts because I'm able to see all those on gallery. So whoever wants.
Neeraj, can you switch off your video because you're talking on phone? Naveen bhai, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm stopping it from my end because I've got a co-host rights. It disturbs me when I'm talking to you people and you are on phone. It like, you know, it's like an insult. I'm sorry, but I mean, I don't appreciate that. You can put your video on mute. I'm okay with it. Video off. It's okay. Apart from this, if any question, or I'll move on to the second segment of payment frauds.
Yeah, I guess there are no questions right now.
Okay.
So let's.
So digital payments, right now, most of you may have used UPI, Unified Payments Interface. This is the most secure platform which one can get. And I'm telling you from my experience because I was part of the team when this got launched in 2016. I was working with NPCI at that point in time. And apart from that, if you see the way in which this is offered to the users, uh, there cannot be any secure mechanism than UPI currently as we speak. There are chances of debit card fraud, credit card fraud, net banking fraud, but UPI frauds are very, very remote. Reason being, UPI verifies the sender and the receiver while the payments are being made. Now, what do I mean by this? Uh, it is very difficult for us to remember the account and the IFSC code because practically 16 digit, 12 digit, they are different account numbers for different bank, and IFSC codes again 11 digit, different for different banks and branches. So UPI is a platform which allows you to make a payment to the person on a virtual payment address, which is called VPA. It is username @ bank name. That is the format of the UPI ID. And any account that you this money in that account, or you can send money to somebody from that account which is linked with this VPA. Now in UPI there are two features. One is the pay feature, one is the receive money feature, or send money feature, or collect money feature. So the maximum fraud that we see in UPI is because of this collect feature, wherein the fraudster sends a link to the person of a collect request, which is where he is collecting money from you, and then he says that this is a collect request that you are going to collect money from me, so kindly click on the link and authorize it and you will receive the money. Whereas in actual operation, when you do that, the money will get debited from your account and go to the person who has sent you this collect request. And because of this collect request only, that fraud happens. Otherwise there is no other fraud which can happen on UPI. If you make a payment, so Shamim Khan says, how effective is our cybersecurity strategy at addressing business risk? Shamim, let me finish this payment module and then I will talk to you on this because it is not related to the payment module. It's a policy and a law discussion which will come on the third module. So I'll park your question right now and I'll answer it once I do the third session on the legal recourse and the business risk aspect of it. So UPI is secure except where the collect request is made, and nowadays you get SMSs also which says that if you approve, the money will get debited from your account. So that becomes an alert for a person to reject any anonymous unsolicited request for a payment. If possible, you should make payments and receive payments through UPI only because that is very, very secure. When you make a payment, you have to know the VPA, that is a virtual payment address of the other side. And the moment you type the VPA of the other person to whom you are making the payment, you will get the name of the full name, which is registered as per the bank account. So that gives you a sense of surety that yes, this name is relevant name and I am making payment to this ID. Then you are asked to put the amount and then you are asked to put the UPI pin and then the money goes to the beneficiary. While requesting the money, whenever you are requesting a money from someone, again, you need to know the VPA, because when you type the VPA, you get on the screen the name of the other person. And then whatever amount may be due from the other person to you, you may type that amount and send the request. The person gets a notification that the so-and-so person is asking for so-and-so amount from you. On approving the link, this amount will go from your bank account and it will get credited to the other side. So this two-step verification is not otherwise available if you do NEFT or other payment mode. So that's why I say UPI is very, very secure. But in the digital payment context, when we see, we find a lot of people getting duped because of the UPI collect request. Secondly, when they do a payment online, they are told that you have to activate your account to make a payment to us by giving your debit card and OTP, and only 10 rupees will get deducted for the test, and it will be reversed back within half an hour. So people, without knowing or having knowledge, they will give their debit card number, they will give their expiry, they will give their CVV, they will give their OTP. 10 rupees also gets deducted. After that, they never get their money back. In fact, they are then asked for another OTP, and whatever is the amount linked in the saving account, is the entire amount is at risk. So as a user, if you want to make payments online, never ever use debit cards. I don't recommend it to be used. If you want to use, you can use credit card with a lower limit because your risk will be less, and or you use UPI if required. But debit cards is a big risk, because if the websites are not secure, if your card details are leaked, it can be used on foreign sites, and foreign sites do not ask you OTP. Only Indian sites will ask you OTP. So if you pay on a foreign site, you get your money back, because as per RBI, your card should be authenticated only after two-factor authentication. The payment should be proceeded. But for international transactions, it will take time for you to get that money back. It takes up to 6 months of time. So whatever amount is there will be at stake, will be at risk. In credit card, you get 45 days of grace period to make a payment, and you get time to dispute the transaction if something is not proper, and the bank will temporarily reverse the credit to you, and they do the investigation. If your claim is found to be genuine, they will reverse the charge. If there is some manipulation, then they will ask you to pay. So credit cards are safe than debit cards. UPI is safe than your NEFTs. uh, that is more about the digital payments what you are going to make and going to receive. Also, there are frauds which happens because of the QR code. Most of the time now people are asking you to scan the QR code and make a payment. So this QR code may be correct, may be incorrect. If you do not pay attention while making the payment, and you don't verify the name of the merchant when you scan a QR code, you can be targeted by the fraudsters, because they send their QR code embossed on the true QR code and send you by WhatsApp or through a fake website. So there was a very interesting case which happened in Bombay, where shopkeeper had put a QR code outside the shop. So anybody who wants to make a digital payment, they can scan the QR and make a payment. So, and this was so outside, such outside, that when the shop was locked, the QR code would still be displayed. So a person created a QR code of his payment and pasted on that wall. So subsequently, on the second day, when the people went for shopping, they used to make payment on the QR code. The amount used to get debited from their account. And he says कि कुछ बैंक में टेक्निकल प्रॉब्लम है, आपको SMS नहीं आ रहा, आप चेक कर लेना बैंक के पास. तो in 1 hour he almost lost some 20,000 rupees. And then he realized by himself, when he scanned, the QR was displaying a different name of a different merchant. So never publicly put a QR code on such walls, which can be easily manipulated by a fraudster. Instead of that, you can send on an email. Website also, people posting QR code. Somebody may create a fake web page or a phishing web page with a QR code of theirs and the details of yours. So in fact, payment links are the new ways of making payment, where you can send a payment link to the user, which is offered by the payment gateways and aggregators. Those are also secured, because that verify the merchant as well as the user. Even you can use that for the payment. Especially in the digital payment category, another fraud is about KYC, where a fake or a wrong KYC can be done. So you have your own mobile number, you get a call from the wallet that your wallet is going to expire if you don't activate it. And because of this COVID, we are doing activation online through video KYC or through the app. Kindly download one app like Quick Support or TeamViewer. They ask you to download this software on your phone. After downloading software on the phone, they take the control of your mobile phone. And after taking the control of your mobile phone, all the OTP and messages are read by them. And then they will link their or somebody else's KYC document with your mobile number wallet. After doing that KYC, your mobile wallet becomes a bank account. payments bank account. It is no more a wallet. And being a bank account, all operations of money transfer, receive, send can be done using that wallet. And the password and all, if you were to change, it will take at least 1 to 2 hours for you to block, check and save, because your customer care will be contacted. You will have to block it if you temporary, get it rectified. And in that 1 2 hours of time, when you are doing all this recovery, the fraudster will use this account to do fund transfer, receive funds, and any anonymous or unauthorized transaction of amount, the law enforcement will come to your door to do inquiry of it, because it was your number, your bank account which got authorized, and it was reflecting in the transaction. So fake KYC scams are also happening by this. Yes, in fact, yesterday only there is now this new trend of Aadhaar loan. You will get a SMS, get loan on Aadhaar verification up to 40-50% without EMI under RBI moratorium scheme, and people are told to give their Aadhaar card on WhatsApp, copy of the Aadhaar card on the WhatsApp, and that those accounts are then used to open fake accounts online through online KYC. So please ensure that any link of such nature, if you receive or if your family and friends are receiving it, do not entertain that, do not click on it, do not supply information, because you may be the target on the other side when it happens. Apart from this, a lot of time people have a query whether we make payments through Google Pay, is it safe, is it secure or not. So Google Pay payments are secure, safe, because ultimately they are having a tie-up with ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, SBI Bank. But if anything goes wrong with the transaction, you have to follow up with the bank and get your transaction resolved. Google does not help you to resolve the transaction wrongly paid to someone, or a wrong money is received by you for that matter. So when there is something where a particular payment application is to be used, it is always advisable and preferred that you have your own account, bank account app to be used. So if something goes wrong, or there is some query or anything which is not correct, your bank can help you immediately than the third party bank. Because in this payment UPI option, you can link, say you have account in ICICI Bank and Kotak Bank, but in the UPI ID of ICICI Bank, you can link a Kotak account, and in the UPI ID of Kotak Bank, you can link ICICI Bank account. So it could be a cross-bank linking also, which is possible in the UPI VPA. Now, by doing so, you are doing complicated stuff by having multiple bank linked to a bank ID, which is not supposed to be. So if something goes wrong, then you'll have to contact your bank where you're having account, as well as the bank for which you have a UPI ID. So always prefer to use a bank app which will where you have account with. Okay. Another issue about bank is never do a payment for third party or third person. If somebody says that you make a payment for me, do not do so, because if you are not able to establish the communication for that, you may be violating FEMA and other PMLA guidelines. So never ever do that. In fact, I got a case from a website developer where there was this gentleman who approached him that I want to create a 2-page website, and to save the GST, this website developer took the money in his saving account, not in the company account, to save the GST amount on 5,000 rupees. And this person also told them that you please book the domain name. I will pay you for that. I don't know how to book the domain name. And this all was on a phone, virtual communication, phone communication, nothing in writing. And this person then created the domain name with his credit card, made the website for them for that amount to save the GST, and hosted the website. And this website was actually used to commit fraud. And this person did a fraud of 20 lakh rupees and he absconded. And now police is catching this developer because his mobile number was reflecting, his credit card was reflecting for booking the domain name, his payment details is reflecting in the bank account. But the actual fraud what he did from this website, that person is now absconding, and this guy is caught because all the trace logs are pointing to this web developer. So, if you're into web development business and if you're supposed to do this kind of work, take a written authorization from your clients that they authorize you to book the domain name and make a payment on behalf of them, and then you make the payment and then you take a reimbursement from them. With this written letter, you can save legal hassles for yourself. If you don't have this in writing, that permission, then it is assumed that you are the owner of this domain, you are the owner of this portal, and all the liability is what you are inviting from them. So this was on the second session of payments. Any questions on this? Kindly raise your hand in the chat or write questions, and then I'll move on to the third module of legal recourse. Anybody has any questions?
Hello, hi. I have one question.
Yeah, may I know your name, please?
This is Manish.
Yeah, hi Manish, tell me.
Hi. You know, regarding the Aadhaar card, when you said that your Aadhaar card details can be used for various frauds and everything, but 90% cases today, we have to give our Aadhaar card details, even if for a telephone call, for any connection, anything. The Aadhaar card, it's kind of a document which is roaming around. Most of the photocopies which are taken by the executives, I don't think so they even use it. After the job is done, those photocopies will be loitering around everywhere. It's kind of a big data for everyone. How can you save it? How can you save your Aadhaar card details from going public or being misused?
See, first and foremost, after the judgment of 26th of September 2018, Aadhaar is not mandatory document which you are supposed to give. This is for you to know. You should have the knowledge of this. Only for income tax purpose, you have to link your Aadhaar to PAN card, but the photocopy of Aadhaar cannot be asked by anybody. If they are asking, they can be penalized and fined up to 1 CR, and it's an offense for asking Aadhaar card. If you yourself voluntarily give it, then it is okay. But nobody can ask you to give Aadhaar card only as the mode of document. Only in the case of death of a person, you have to give Aadhaar card to register the death entry in the system. Otherwise, Aadhaar card is not supposed to be given for your SIM cards, for your other purposes. There are other KYC documents like your driving license, voter ID, passport, election. Those can be used. But if you are giving this document, as I told you in the first session, that you should attest it with the reason and the narration for which you are giving the document, then the chances of it getting misused are very, very remote or less. Suppose if you are giving a photocopy, you have to cross the photocopy and write on the photocopy itself that this document is given for, say, KYC or maybe for subscription of some service on so and so date, so and so time, to the recipient entity. If you are giving it to a person, write his name. If you are giving it to some bank, write the bank name, branch name. If you are giving it to some agent for purposes, write his or her name. So whenever you write this and you give the document, if something goes wrong and it is traced to the KYC document of this, then the person who receives the document is liable, not you. But if you don't attest it and give it blankly, then it's as good as anybody, it is assumed that you have given it to them.
Okay, but now here my other question is,
1 second. There is one more part to this, then you ask me the second question. And also secondary, Aadhaar is biometric authentication is not accepted now. There is a OTP based authentication for Aadhaar, which can be done only by the Aadhaar user who has a linked mobile number to it through their own computers by uploading the XML file, which is more for the advanced or a technical user. So this option can be opted if you want to ensure your Aadhaar is not given to somebody, and still if you want to use Aadhaar, you can use it in this fashion. So you can continue with your second part now.
Okay. My second question, when you say that cross it and give it, all right, I've crossed it and give it, it might not be used for that particular execution of the order, whatever I have given it for, but the details are out. Those details can still be used somewhere else.
No, but if those details are used, you get a notification by OTP or other means. It cannot be just used without a verification from the user.
Okay, so now basically we need to link it.
I have your Aadhaar number with me. Okay, a 12-digit number is with me. The moment I try to initiate something, you get an alert or a SMS for that. Okay, without that,
I cannot get it, Ashish.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, I'll just reconfirm whether we get it or not. Okay.
Yeah, you get it.
Okay.
And on the Aadhaar website, there is an option for you to block your biometric authentication and unlock it only when you are supposed to do it. Like, say, for example, if you're doing property or you want to invest in property, then Aadhaar is compulsory for the state property registration. So for that, they will take a biometric authentication. So then on the Aadhaar website, you have to go unlock your biometric authentication. It remains open for 10 minutes. Then after 10 minutes, again, it becomes locked. So you can keep
Okay.
your profile locked by going to your Aadhaar website and get it done. That is another
Okay.
safety for that.
Right. Secondly, as per the order you mentioned just now, the 26th September, that it's not mandatory for me to give Aadhaar. There are other documents. Now, most of the time, especially the SIM card, and especially when you're talking about certain bill payments or new connections of geos and others, they don't recognize election commission card or well, passport I never tried. Yes, but at least election commission card is not recognized anymore.
Where are
Is
you
the,
based out of, Manish?
I'm based Noida.
Noida. Maybe it is particular issue with that, because in Bombay, I have Geo connection on my driving license and my telephone MTNL bill. Okay. I have not given my Aadhaar to them. I have been very vocal saying that if you ask me Aadhaar, I will take you to the cops. And
Well,
without even
we are not
discussing-
aware of those
Yeah.
laws. No? Now we
Yeah.
are aware, and we can say that it's not mandatory. You will have to give it to me on the license.
There
Because
is
very
a
casually,
option-
when they say that, oh, I cannot do it on this, okay, yaar, Aadhaar chahiye le, Aadhaar le le. You know, that's how we do it. So that's
Right.
good to know.
No, and
We
in
can
fact,
say no to it.
in fact, the new technique of Airtel and Jio is such that your documents, what they do, they don't take a photocopy from you.
They
They
take a
take
picture
a
and put it on the.
picture on their mobile phone.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is another alternate. There are two ways of doing it. First is since when they take a photo of it, the person who takes photo, even his photograph is captured by the mobile app. So there is a
Okay.
surety and seriousness that yes, the person who is authorizing you is also being recorded. Alternatively, I have created. I have this small plastic bags of card size where you can put your plastic PVC cards in it. With a marker, I write on it that this photocopy is this original copy is being captured by the telecom operator for KYC. And then I tell them, you take a photo of this now. Don't take a photo of my card without this plastic cover.
Okay.
So I do that way, which is a sophisticated, better way. You want my photo? Yes, you take it, but I will have to write this before you take a photo.
Understood.
They will not mind because it's an original photo. You put on a plastic, because when you put plastic and whatever write you with the marker you write, that plastic when you throw the card is safe without any alteration. So use that and then allow them to take photographs.
Good. That's pretty helpful. Thank you, dear.
Yeah. Okay, so the third session is now on the law. Next 10 minutes about your recourse, and then we will conclude. So there is one question from Samim Khan, which says, how effective is our cyber security strategy at addressing business risk? Now, if you're asking me this as a policy from the government of India point of view, I have a different answer. If you're asking me this from your independent company perspective, I have a different answer. So please clarify what is this related to?
Both point of view, from the government of India as per our strategy also.
Okay, so the first, from the government point of India, we are not having adequate cyber security strategy in our country, to be honest, because there are three arms to there are three sections in which this framework is defined. One is the policy, strategy, and enforcement. So we have policy in place, we have a strategy in place, but enforcement is a bit weak comparatively. That's why I say it is not effective in the country. However, saying that your IT Act, if you implement it in the true spirit, okay, even if you implement 20-30% of the IT Act, you will save 70% of the cyber risks.
Okay.
That is how powerful the law is. That is how powerful the policy and the provisions are. Now, you are a businessman or you are an employee somewhere, Shamim?
No, I am an employee. I am working as a HR manager in Microwave Computing Gurgaon.
Okay, so in your company, you have a lot of policy documentations about acceptable policy, HR policy, email policy and stuff. Now, all these are generated or created from the requirements of compliance, like your IT Act. In the IT Act, there is an option which gives you a demonstration of how you create a policy, how you create a security policy, what controls you need to incorporate, and what are the safety mechanisms. So
Yes.
so from that perspective, your business is fairly covered, and you being in the HR domain, you are in fact one of the one to drive this across employees. Okay, so policy may be made by businesses or other departments or IT, but the communication of the policy to the employees, other employees, is job of the HR. So from the business perspective, if you are having policy and implemented those policy, you would be in a better posture compared to others. Now, cybersecurity does not only mean that if you are into IT or bank, you have to do it. If you are a network of computers or any business where you are using more than say 2 or more computers, then it's defined as a network. The protection of the network is the responsibility of the business owner or the computer user. In your normal context, when you use computers in the business, your documentation says in the appointment letter itself, if you are found to misuse the asset of the company or any unauthorized communication which is being copied or shared by you, you may be criminally proceeded or liable for civil consequences. So this itself is a deterrent for people to not misuse or exploit the technology which is given to them. Okay, so from the state point of view, enforcement or legal recourse is a bit slow, because the judiciary and the legal cases, it takes time. So from that perspective, it is not effectively implemented. Otherwise, our IT Act is self-sufficient in itself to cover a large spectrum of offenses which may happen online. Uh, there is a portal called cybercrime.gov.in. I'm going to type it in the chat as well. Here you can go and do a complaint if you find anything which is suspicious or cyber related. You can go to cybercrime.gov.in, and if there is a woman or children related issue, you can report it. There are two mechanisms here. One is anonymous and one is with registering your user ID and password. I would always suggest you to do it with your username and password. Don't do anonymous reporting, because that doesn't serve any purpose. A serious issue may get diluted if it is anonymous reporting. And there is an option of other types of cybercrime, wherein you can report banking fraud or other frauds which are apart from the normal woman and child related crimes on this portal. It is by the Ministry of Home Affairs. You can complain online from your home. The complaint will go to your local police station, and then you will get officer who will call you for further details and statement, and then the FIR can be registered. So this is a very easy, handy portal for you to report cybercrime. If you observe something or if you find something, you can report it from your home. Apart from this, the IT Act has two sides of remedy. One is the criminal remedy and one is the civil remedy. The criminal remedy is to punish the person for doing something wrong, and civil remedy is to recover the loss if you face something because of that entity. Like for example, your mobile number is linked with your bank account, and by some fraudulent means your telecom operator is given a fake document or your ID is stolen, and he issues the SIM card to somebody else. Now this person impersonates you, steals your identity, and commits a fraud. Okay, he does something wherein you face a loss of some transaction in your bank account. Now this kind of activity, he should be punished definitely, but you want to also recover the loss which you have faced because of the lack of control by the telecom person, because they issued a SIM card to a fake person on a fake document ID. So under the IT Act, there is a civil remedy under section 43A, which is if a body corporate fails to protect the customer data and reasonable security practices and procedures are not followed, then up to 5 CR is the penalty which can be claimed from such entity through the court of IT. Now for that, you have to file a case, you have to pay the court fees, and then the judgment comes from the court. This may take anything between 1 year to 3 years for a completion. But after that case fighting, you get the damages from the entity who has done, because of which this wrong happened to you. So in this case, the telecom operator will have to pay the amount to you if proved that there was some lacuna from their end before authorizing and verifying the KYC of the customer and issuing the SIM card. Similarly, if there is a bank account and the bank account is opened without proper KYC or a fake KYC, and the bank is not able to identify that, and the fraudulent transaction happen in that account, or there is a money which get siphoned off from that account, and your money goes to this account and then gets siphoned off, then that bank who is not doing KYC properly will have to pay you the loss because of that account which was opened without proper KYC. So such kind of incidents and activities are covered under the IT Act, and you can do that remedy filing at a special court. So each of the, we have some 29 states in the country. Each of these states have a IT secretary. This IT secretary is a special judge under the IT Act for handling cybercrime cases. So this remedy of civil, where you are going to claim the amount for any loss, is you have to go and file the case against in his forum under the IT Act provisions. Alternatively, you can choose consumer court, but if you choose consumer court, then you can't go to the IT secretary's court. You can choose either of the one. You can't do both the case, one in consumer as well as one in the IT case, to get the damages claimed. So IT Act allows you to have a special remedy wherein if any offense happens and you suffer a loss, financial loss because of that, then you can get it claimed from the IT secretary, who is a special judge under the IT Act. Also, consumer court sometimes is more effective and better compared to IT Act, is because consumer court fees are less compared to the IT court. So for example, if you have a claim of around 20 lakh rupees, in the consumer court, you only pay 500 rupees as a court fee. For that same 20 lakh, if you have to claim from the IT secretary's court or IT adjudicating officer's court, you will end up paying around 5,000 for the first 1 lakh rupee and 2% for every subsequent 1 lakh of claim. So 19 to 38,000 and 5. 43,000 is the court fee that you will have to pay if you are going to claim a compensation of 20 lakh rupees in the IT adjudicating court. Whereas the same remedy, if you go to the consumer court, you only pay 500 rupees as the court fee. So, but you can choose any one of the forum. You can't do it in both, and you have to fall in the definition of consumer for the case to go in the consumer court. So, like a user, if you are a user of telecom service, you are a consumer. If you are a customer of a bank, you are a consumer. If you are a customer with email service provider, then you are a consumer. So, and this is only in the case of individuals. When the company is there, then you have to go to the IT adjudicating officer, because it's a civil court. There is no companies do not classify as consumers under certain cases, so there will be a different legal recourse for those cases. I think 1 hour is over. So any questions from the team? Or
No.
Rohan,
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind information and a very valuable and very good answer by your side. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Rohan, you can take on from this, or Pankaj, you can take it. I'm done with the discussions of the 3 modules. If any questions from the participants, let me know, or we can conclude then.
Great. Thank you so much, Vicky. That was enlightening even for me after all these years. A lot of new things to learn. Thank you for your time and really enlightening us. I hope everybody takes back a lot with them and are able to change a lot of the things that we do in our day-to-day lives. As simple as how you execute your documents when passing those on for your KYC or other requirements. That is something that's a real eye-opener even for us. So we take back a lot of these things with us, and thank you so much for guiding all of us. Probably we need another session for how businesses conduct their cybersecurity. That I think is a discussion in itself. We'll probably have one of these sessions soon. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Or I think we are done with the event. I would like to firstly thank Vicky for taking out time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with all these information and details. And thank you to all the associated tables, NDRE 24, DSRE 32, DART 31, and MRE 346 for organizing such an event. And a special thanks to Ashish Killa and Pratik Agarwal, the LAPD conveners, for their time and effort in helping us organizing this and spreading the word. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking our time. I hope you take back a lot with you, and we will see you soon. Happy Navratras.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye bye.
I want to mention.
Thank you, everybody.
I also want to mention, Vicky, a very, taken this. You have taken this session very clearly in very simple words, and something which comes to us each and every day. So while you were telling things, I was relating to, yes, we don't even give a thought while doing those things. You don't go into that that this may affect us in such a way. It has opened a lot of possibilities, and each one of us who attended this session will be paying more attention now.
Meeting what?
Or
Parth, can you mute yourself, please? Yeah. Sorry, Pankaj, I missed your.
sorry. Yeah. So while while we are asked for an OTP, or we are asked for any sort of identification or some proof, we have now some tools where we can ensure that we are not being compromised anywhere. And very simply, very interestingly put up. Really great. Congratulate you, Vicky, for designing something which is of interest to each one of us.
Yeah.
I just had one more thing to add. Sorry.
Is, when we started, you said you should make it, more simple. So I was just trying to have that, because most of the times I try to make it very simple and crisp, so that people relate it. It is useful for them, rather than giving them something which is, like in the air and talking in the air. I mean, it doesn't solve any purpose for any of us.
I had one more thing to add, Pankaj and Vicky. Sometime back, I had a family friend who's aged my father's age, who called us up. And, this is very important. All of us are still very tech savvy, but our parents do use phones and laptops, but they're not very well versed with how things really happen in terms of the cyber frauds. And this gentleman, who must be nearly 70, who uses Google Pay, Paytm, all of these for his transactions, receives a call to in terms of his Google Pay account, and he gets an SMS, he gets an OTP, he gives out this OTP, and imagine this guy is an IIT professor. He teaches at IIT Kharagpur. I'm talking about a guy who's very well educated and is a professor himself at a tech university, and he lost nearly 4 or 5 lakhs with that transaction. Certainly, he got it back after a few months. Like Vicky said, it is a time-consuming process. But what it really brings to the fore, and when I see my parents, my Tauji, Taji, and everybody, all of them are using technology, but they are not so well versed with the cyber frauds. And I think it's very important that we also educate them and our kids, especially people who have teenagers who now use a lot of online forums for shopping and other areas. So one thing very important is never save your card details when you're shopping. A lot of times when you enter your card details, they will ask, do you want to save your details for later? I think that is also something you should avoid doing.